Hey guys, I've been pretty busy lately, and that's why the video frequency has slowed down. But I just wanted to touch upon a couple of things that have been bubbling up in my consciousness, and one thing that's sort of an update. The update had to do with, Justice Thomas. As you may or may not know, you should know, Justice Thomas has been caught in an ethical quandary a couple of times. One, because his wife apparently, this is in the past, his wife apparently has been involved, um, had something to do with January, you know what? I can't mention it here because it's a small channel, but something to do with the Trump accusation that the election wasn't fair. And the second thing is that he's been caught taking gifts, I guess vacations and private jet rides, I guess, from a billionaire friend of his, who he has this guy, he's described him, Thomas has described this guy as a very close personal friend, right? And these appear to be, or would be, in any normal circumstance, great things of value and bribes. And so that's a problem. Anyway, uh, as I predicted before, I said the liberals aren't going to do, and what I mean by that is really all of them and all the Democrats, the liberals aren't going to do anything about this problem. They're not going to hold hearings. They're not going to try to impeach a sitting Supreme Court justice because they are afraid of holding the Supreme Court accountable. Apparently, according to this article, let me read you the title. The title of this article is Dick Durbin has already abandoned calling Clarence Thomas to justify taking secret special gifts. So he was going to call Clarence Thomas. The point of that, I don't really know what the point of that was, but he was going to do it and probably question Clarence Thomas on a few things, and he abandoned the call. And the reality is, Dick Durbin is, Dick Durbin is a senator. He's the number 2 Democrat in the Senate. And he knows, and he's been questioned on this, that the Supreme Court of the United States does not have an ethical standard. In other words, they're unlike the executive branch, which has laws governing it, etc., as a result of Watergate and all of this, and some laws that govern, at least theoretically, members of Congress. There really isn't much governing the Supreme Court in terms of ethics. So it turns out that it's the responsibility of the Chief Justice to come up with an ethical code, right? And he's been around, I don't know, 2 decades or more, and he doesn't have one. Even though it's pretty clear that any normal ethical guideline would forbid justices from taking private jet plane rides from people. So this is not just Justice Thomas's problem, it's also Roberts' problem. But Roberts is incapable of standing up to the right wing. He is very right wing himself, but he's not quite as nuts as Alito and Thomas, but he can't stand up to them. In fact, pretty much in our entire system, nobody can stand up to the right wing. Everybody just assumes that right-wingers are just a complaint machine, and there's too much flack, and they're all going to be painting themselves up as victims, and if you do anything about them, this is a big quest, and it's a lynching, and which is, remember, Thomas used that phrase, lynching, in his confirmation hearings. So this is a big thing, like if you criticize Republicans at all, it's a victimization, like Donald Trump. Never in the history of mankind has a man ever been so persecuted like me. That's the kind of theatrics that they'll pull. So it's a big pain in the butt, and liberals don't have the strength to carry through. So Dick Durbin didn't call Justice Thomas, and it doesn't look like they're going to do anything about this problem. There's just a quote from the article. One of the main questions that have surfaced over the past few years amid financial scandals and political alliances for the justices is that Roberts' court has no code of ethics. Okay? Why this Supreme Court, these 9 justices, this is a quote, why this Supreme Court, these 9 justices believe they are exempt from the basic standards of disclosure, I cannot explain, and I think the Chief Justice should appear before a committee and explain something or explain the changes that he's going to make, Durbin said. Okay? But that was on TV. So nothing's going to happen. So there won't be any hearings. There's not going to be a subpoena demanding that he go before the Senate or a committee in the House. Of course, the House is controlled by Republicans, so that's really not going to happen. So expect there to be absolutely nothing other than internet talk and some hey on MSNBC. Nothing's going to happen other than that. All right. However, they have their own kind of scandal over on the other side, on the Democratic Party side. This also, I mean, it's been going on for a long time, months, if not years, but Diane Feinstein herself sits on the Judiciary Committee. And the Judiciary Committee is the committee that decides with, as it says in the Constitution, with advice and consent, they basically do job interviews for the judiciary. That means the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, and it's one of the most important, easily top 3 committees in Congress. And she sits on that committee. She's been on that committee for decades, but she can't go to any of the meetings. She can't go to any of the meetings because she's too old to do her job, right? But the majority leader, Chuck Schumer, has steadfastly refused until recently to take her off the committee. Now that he wants to take her off the committee, right, she's not resigning. They're not calling for her to resign because that would actually be ethical. Instead, what they were trying to do is replace her with some other Democrat, which they can do, supposedly. But the Republicans have said, oh no, we're going to block that, right? So what does that really mean? What that means is that the Republicans are coming to the rescue of the Democrats because this is totally a Democratic Party problem. They basically created the problem by running her, even though they knew she was at the end of her life. I mean, let's be honest, these are her twilight years, and she should be enjoying a rocking chair and sunsets. You know what I mean? I don't want to be harsh, but she should not be working anymore. And they should have not run her again in California, which, by the way, if you don't know anything about California, basically voters are given a sheet of paper through the mail and they're told who to vote for, and that's who wins. It's a very automatic process. Once you're in the establishment zone, then you basically win 98% of the time. And her name recognition and the fact that she's always on these tickets, on these Democratic Party tickets, means that she's going to win automatically, no matter what she's incapable or capable of doing. But I could talk at length about how she's been in the way of progress for decades, but we're not going to go there. Suffice it to say, she's just always being run, and the Democrats never want to get rid of her, and she always wins. And they just basically ran her last time, and she handily beat her opponent. Not that I'm saying her opponent would have been, 100,000% better, but she killed him even though she doesn't go to debates and she doesn't do speeches and she has no speaking ability left. She's cooked. It's done. It's over. Stick a fork in her. But yet she's still on the committee, right? So this was a problem of the Democratic Party's making. But now the Republicans have given the Democrats and liberals a shield Because instead of talking how this is Chuck Schumer's fault and how the Democrats in California shouldn't have run Diane Feinstein, they can just turn around and say, but the Republicans are blocking us from replacing her on committee. They're the evil ones. And the reason I'm raising this point is so that you understand this is how they work. They work in tandem to cover things up. And whenever the Democrats need it, whenever they need someone to cover up either what you can perceive as incompetence, maybe other things, but usually it's perceived as incompetence. Whenever that happens, the Republicans show up twirling their long mustaches and getting ready to tie women to the train tracks just in the nick of time to make it seem like they're the real villain of the piece. But of course, they're working together. It's good cop, bad cop. So that's why I want to emphasize that, because that's what's really going on. It is totally and completely the fault of the Democratic Party that she's even there. She shouldn't have been there. She should have immediately been removed once she didn't go to more than 1 or 2 or 3 meetings. There should have been some limit. And this is impeding the ability of the Democratic Party because of one person, because they all have class loyalty to one another and they don't want to hurt her. Because of this, it's literally impeding the ability of the President of the United States to appoint judges to the judiciary. So that's a problem. Anyway, that's the second issue. So today there was a third issue that came up. This is not having to do with Washington or politicians in particular, but this morning I got up and I was checking my Facebook, and I got really angry because on Facebook I complained, and this is really this will gel with one of the themes of this channel. You see, a couple of days ago, I think, or yesterday, I posted something about how Alec Baldwin was never going to be held accountable. And some of my friends who are liberals got really, upset about this and got defensive. And it turns out that politics in the U.S., as I've said before, there's very few lefties. So most politics in the U.S. is basically R versus D. And it gets to the point that if you could vote for someone, let's say you're a Democrat, and you hold your nose and you vote for somebody that you really don't like, and then that person wins, Republicans will then attack that person over and over and over and invent lies. And then because they're lies, Democrats feel the need to defend from those lies, right? And before you know it, they're psychologically invested in that candidate, which they never liked to begin with. They didn't like that candidate, but they had to vote for that candidate to stop the Republicans. And then as they defend that politician who's in office from the slings and arrows of Republican lies, psychologically, they start to identify and they start to even like that Democrat that they're defending. So that happens. And sometimes what happens is you can even have celebrities who are famous liberals, and because Republicans are attacking them, liberals feel the need to defend said person. Alec Baldwin's a liberal, and because he's a liberal and because he's a Democrat, all these people feel the need to defend him as if they know him personally, or as if he matters, or as if he's automatically right, or as if he can't abuse his position in life. And so they immediately jumped down my throat and immediately came up with really illogical, uninformed, and frankly stupid arguments. Now let me tell you why. If you know anything about Alec Baldwin, you know that, you should know. You can always pause this video and use Google. You should know that he beat the rap, which was, what was it? Involuntary manslaughter, I think. And he beat the rap, and the DA threw that out. The excuse for that was, well, the gun might have been modified or whatever. So it might have been, the gun could have been fired without being cocked. I think what we're talking about is like a Western. We're talking about like an old gun, like an old revolver. Ordinarily, you'd have to cock it and then fire. And this gun supposedly was modified, so you don't have to do that. There's a couple of problems with this. Number one, there's at least one affidavit which demonstrates that they had live ammunition on set. They had a mix of live ammunition and dummy ammo, and they had been using it to train actors on set. That's already a problem because you absolutely do not want to have live ammo on set. It's incredibly dangerous. And so some of it, I guess it would come in the box, and some of it would rattle, and some of it doesn't rattle, and that's how you know. I think the ones that rattle are the blank ones. But they obviously should have been able to distinguish between the two, right? But it turns out sometime before the death occurred, part of the cast part of the crew walked out due to a lack of safety meetings. And there were other issues too, having to do with pay or the location and the long hours. And of course, long hours and being tired and being a long way from where the motel is, the distance between the motel and the set and the long hours. When you're on a movie set, 16, 17 hours could be routine. And the longer that distance is and the more you shoot, the more tired you are and the more mistakes you're going to make. On top of that, they didn't do their safety protocols the way they should have. Now, this movie, I want to make this clear, was made by Alec Baldwin's production company. So he was the most powerful person on set. The director isn't somebody I've heard of. So he was definitely the most powerful person on set. And so it's definitely his responsibility to set the tone of the production. Okay? So those are just some of the issues. Another issue is if you have a blank, or if you have a fake gun that's not, or I should say a gun that can shoot blanks, people can still die from that. So even if you have a gun that has a blank, you're not supposed to point it at anyone. And he pointed this weapon at someone and killed them. So if his excuse is, I thought it was a blank, that doesn't work. And if his excuse is, I thought it was a prop gun, that is a gun that doesn't fire anything, that doesn't work because he ordered his prop master to give him a real gun. As we know, it was leaked. Texts were leaked from somebody, from the prop master, I think, that put Alec Baldwin at odds with his own prop master. Because he told him he did not want to use a fake weapon. He wanted to use a real one. And that, combined with the fact that they had been using live ammo on the set, shows that they knew there was a problem. They had ample warning there was a problem. And they violated their safety protocol. And then on top of that, he pointed the gun at somebody. So even saying that the gun was modified so that it could go off without being cocked, even if that were true, it can't go off on its own. He's got to be able to. He fired it. The point is not did he intentionally kill someone. The point is that did he show enough callous disregard that he should be held to account by the law? I find it very difficult to believe that he didn't know any of this was going to happen. Like, if you've got live ammo on the set, you have to have a strict safety protocol, and you cannot point any of these weapons at anyone. I mean, you just can't. The way that it's done is you'll have a shot, they'll be shooting into thin air where there's nobody there, and then there'll be a cut, and then on the other side, they'll shoot the other opposing actors shooting into blank space. Then that's edited together via montage theory, so it looks like they're opposite each other, but they're never really in the same setup. There's different setups, right? And it's just spliced together. So anyway, you might think this is nitpicking, but that's how productions are supposed to work. That's what the lesson should have been from the Twilight Zone incident, because John Landis, before he pushed the helicopter to go lower and lower, you might remember in the Twilight Zone, John Landis was directing that, and the helicopter ended up coming down and beheading actor Vic Morrow and killing a couple of kids. He had used live ammo on that set, right? And so there's been a history of using live ammo on these sets and using even dummy guns, dummy ammo, blank ammo, which has been dangerous. 2 actors have died from that. So there's been a long history of this, and it's not coming to an end because no one's been forced to pay. Nobody has been held responsible. And by the way, what happens if you do denounce somebody? Like the cameraman did to John Landis. Well, that cameraman didn't get any more work in Hollywood. The guy that was the camera operator that day on the Twilight Zone set. So that's the reality. Now, what these people are doing, what these Democrats are doing by jumping to his defense is that they're basically saying, we didn't learn anything from Me Too, because Me Too was just about white feminist women. It had nothing to do with really challenging power. We learned nothing. And so these people on set, they're free to abuse underlings. They're free to abuse their subordinates on set. They're free to create an air and ambiance of danger, which is what those workers were complaining about. And let me make it clear. This is a worker issue. This is a worker issue. It's just the same Alec Baldwin being the CEO of a corporation and a factory and having people work in that factory lose limbs or their lives. It's the same goddamn thing. So to see Democrats, defending him because he votes the right way or he's pals with Robert De Niro, I don't know. It just made me really, really angry. I shut them up because I gave them the quotes. I gave them what the evidence is. But it just doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense at all. And I really hated that it's just like, like Republicans like it when I do this because Republicans don't like Alec Baldwin. So Republicans have the whole rigmarole where they made videos about him. But it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter who the Republicans like or don't like. There's this thing called right or wrong and challenging power. And, that's what this channel is all about. And the reason that I criticize liberals and people that are supposedly on the American left is because they're really the biggest danger. If Democrats or the left, let's say socialists, if there was ever a big socialist movement in this country, there's 2 possibilities. One is that the liberals would side with the Republicans to crush us. That's the first possibility. That would be called fascism. And the second possibility is that people like Kevin McCarthy and all those people would melt away because they don't really have a base. Their base is rich people and people who don't know any better. Of course, the bases are shifting as we speak right now. Things are complicated and in flux, meaning that the college-educated people are flowing to the Democratic Party, and people who are not educated, let's say petty bourgeoisie and people who are, they don't necessarily have a master's degree, they don't have a college education, they're sort of flowing the Republican Party. That's a very negative development, by the way, because we can talk about that another time. But bottom line here is that the Democrats have just lost their way, and they're the majority. And the left, theoretically, is most people. It's working class people. It's lower middle class people. It's the poor. And if that ever got in gear, it would crush the right wing, utterly destroy them. Which is why there's such an attempt to stop, working class movements or class-based movements. That's why that exists. So when we're talking about this, and if you're a liberal and you're getting in bed with Alec Baldwin, you are a big part of the problem because you basically don't want to judge power. You don't want to judge these people for what they are. All right, I don't want to go too far. 25 minutes is it. Thank you so much for listening, and like and subscribe if you haven't. See me on Twitter And I appreciate any comments you have. And thank you very much. And I'll be busy, but hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.